Real scary ghost. Evidence that will keep you up at night. The whisper said my name. Not once, 3 times, drawn out and breathy, like someone was inches from my ear in the dark. Eli, Eli, Eli. I was alone in an empty farmhouse outside Adams, Tennessee, a handheld recorder flashing its little red light on the table. The air was still, no insects, no cars on the road, just the soft click of the recorder, and the voice that shouldn't have been there. I froze so hard my teeth ached. You know that feeling when the room seems to lean toward you? That's how the kitchen felt. Tilted, expectant, as if the house had been waiting for me to press record. I swallowed, kept my hands flat, and played the last 10 seconds back. The same 3 syllables, barely louder than breath, threaded through the static. My name. No radio bleed. No neighbors. Nothing to explain it. People in Adams have a way of telling you the old stories without blinking. They'll say a name, the Bell Witch, a haunting that made history books and late-night documentaries. In the early 1800s, the Bell family said they heard pounding on walls, footsteps that circled beds, and a voice that answered questions in a clear tone no one could find. Visitors reportedly heard it. Sheriffs wrote it down. A preacher tried to reason with it. The accounts differ, but the theme doesn't. A voice that knew too much and liked to prove it. I didn't come to claim proof. I came to listen. The farmhouse stood a few miles from where the Bell homestead once sat, a quiet rental with sun-faded curtains and a porch that creaked under its own memory. I set my recorder on the kitchen table, turned off the overhead light, and let twilight pour through the window blinds in thin gray stripes. "If anyone's here," I said, keeping my voice even, "I'd like to understand. Where did you come from?" Silence. The kind that makes you hear your own pulse. I tried again, careful not to sound like I was daring anything. "What do you want?" A cabinet hinge ticked once, settling. The refrigerator hummed. I let the recorder run a full minute and stopped it. When I rewound, I expected nothing but the soft blanket of room noise. Instead, between my first question and the second, there was a rush of air, as if someone had leaned close to the mic. Then a whisper, hard to hear until it wasn't. "Still here." I felt the floor under me in a new way, like the planks weren't quite joined. I backed the playback up, pressed my ear to the tiny speaker, and cupped my hand around it. Still here. Clear. Sexless. Patient. The air went cold across my wrists. "Who are you?" My voice cracked on the last word. The answer didn't come on the recorder. It came in the room. From the hallway, down where the front door sat in the dim, something brushed the wall. 3 soft scrapes, like fingers trailing the paint. Then the same whisper, only nearer. Not in my ear this time, but at the edge of the kitchen, where the dark met the tile. "Eli." I stood up so fast the chair legs squealed. That was when I noticed the blinds moving, not swaying, but breathing. The slats drew in and let out, barely, as if the window itself had lungs. Somewhere beneath the house, a pipe knocked. The recorder began to click, a clean mechanical rhythm I couldn't stop, as though an invisible hand was tapping the buttons. I forced myself to say the one question every local warns you not to ask. "If you can speak, can you show yourself?" The fridge hum cut off, leaving the room in a hollow, ringing quiet. In the black glass of the window, a pale shape gathered like fog finding a face. No features yet, just the outline of a head tilting as if it were listening back. And then the recorder, without my touch, started playing the next voice. A woman's voice I didn't recognize, answering a question I hadn't asked, from a place I hadn't been, 400 miles away, inside the belly of an ocean liner where no wind should blow at all. The voice that spilled from my recorder wasn't supposed to exist. It wasn't mine. It wasn't local. It was a woman's tone, steady, low, with the weight of seawater in every syllable. She said only 2 words: "Don't follow." I stared at the tiny speaker as though it had betrayed me. My skin crawled. I was in Tennessee, yet the voice pulled me somewhere else entirely, into the corridors of a ship I had never stepped on but knew by name: the RMS Queen Mary. Docked in Long Beach, California, the Queen Mary is a tourist attraction by day and a ghost hunter's obsession by night. During World War II, it ferried troops across the Atlantic. Men died on board, accidents scarred its decks, and one sailor was reportedly crushed by a watertight door. Today, visitors swear they hear his footsteps echoing through the engine room. Others claim to see a woman in white drifting along the promenade, vanishing before she reaches the stairwell. Even skeptics admit the ship carries an atmosphere that clings. I thought of that as the recording played back again, the woman's voice weaving through static. I had read accounts, paranormal investigators who claimed to capture EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, in the Queen Mary's lower decks. And now here I was, hundreds of miles away, with something answering me in her cadence. I wanted to shut the recorder off, but curiosity anchored me in place. I set it down, pressed record once more, and asked aloud, "Why not follow?" Nothing, just the buzz of silence. Then came a sound that had no business inside that farmhouse kitchen. The long, hollow groan of metal shifting under strain, like steel plates bowing against water. I recognized it instantly from documentaries, the sound of ships settling in the ocean. My breath caught. The blinds stilled, the air grew thick, and I could swear the floorboards beneath me pulsed as if on waves. The next playback captured more than sound. A faint melody threaded through, the tinkling of a piano, elegant but warped, as though the notes were dragged across decades. It sent me reeling back to a photo I once saw of the Queen Mary's Grand Ballroom, where chandeliers still hang above a dance floor no one dares dance on. Guests swear music sometimes leaks through the silence when the room is empty. I shut off the recorder, heart hammering, when a knock rattled the wall. 3 hard raps, close, deliberate. The kitchen light flickered overhead. My pulse shot through my ears. I whispered without meaning to, "Are you here? Or there?" This time, I didn't need the recorder. From the corner of the room came the faint sound of water lapping against wood. Impossible, steady, closer. Then a woman's laugh, soft, broken in half like it had traveled too far. The farmhouse no longer felt like a farmhouse. The walls seemed thinner, the air damp, and I swear I smelled salt. Something was bleeding through, collapsing the miles between Adams, Tennessee, and the steel carcass floating off California's coast. And as I stood frozen, the voice sharpened, not in the recorder but behind me, inches from my shoulder. It said, "You already followed." I spun toward the hallway. Empty. That was when the sound of footsteps began above me, deliberate and heavy. Though the farmhouse had no second floor, the footsteps above me were slow, steady, and heavy enough to make the ceiling dust sift down in thin gray ribbons. My first instinct was denial. The farmhouse had no upstairs, only an attic crawl space. Yet the sound went on, heel to toe, pacing across a floor that didn't exist. I gripped the recorder like a lifeline, pressing the button without even thinking. The red light blinked, and with it, the noise overhead stopped. I strained in the silence until my own pulse was louder than breath. Then, through the static of the recording, came something worse than footsteps, the faint cry of a child. It wasn't sharp or panicked. It was soft, distant, as though it came from down a long corridor. "Mama!" It called once, then again, fading into the hiss of silence. My chest tightened. The Bell Witch had been infamous for voices, but this wasn't Tennessee anymore. It was something else breaking through. The name Waverly Hills clawed into my thoughts. I'd read about it for years. An abandoned tuberculosis sanatorium in Kentucky, where thousands died during the early 1900s. Paranormal investigators called it one of the most haunted places in America. They claimed to hear children laughing in the empty halls, to see shadows darting across doorways, to feel cold hands brush theirs in the pitch black. Some said the most active area was the old 5th floor, where the isolation rooms kept the sickest patients. And now, in a rented farmhouse, a child's cry from Waverly Hills was weaving itself into my recorder. I tried to speak, but my throat felt dry and foreign. "Who are you?" I managed to whisper. The reply came fast, faster than my mind was ready to hear. Not on the recorder, not in the air, but directly inside my head. A girl's voice. "Play with us." Every instinct screamed to leave. I pushed back from the table, chair legs scraping, and moved for the door. My hand closed around the knob, ice cold, wet like it had been left outside in rain. I pulled it open, expecting the quiet stretch of the gravel drive. Instead, I saw a hallway. Not my porch, not the farmyard. A hallway of peeling white paint, long as a tunnel, lined with doors cracked open into blackness. Fluorescent lights buzzed above, but half were dead, casting the corridor in broken patches of light and shadow. My lungs hitched. I knew this hall without ever stepping foot there. I'd seen it in countless photographs of Waverly Hills Sanatorium. I blinked hard, tried to shake it away, and for a breath, it was gone. The porch returned, moonlight spilling across gravel. But only for a breath. When I looked again, the hall stretched back into the dark, deeper, inviting. And at the far end stood a figure, small, childlike, barely more than a silhouette. Its head tilted, body swaying just slightly, as if keeping rhythm to a song I couldn't hear. "Play with us," the voice repeated, both in the hall and in my head. The figure turned. Another appeared beside it. Then another. 3 small shadows waiting. The lights above buzzed, one flickering, and for a split second, the nearest figure's face flashed pale and hollow-eyed. My stomach dropped. The hall seemed to breathe forward, pulling me in, and before I could shut the door, the recorder in my hand played back one final whisper, threading through the static. "It's already your turn." Then the farmhouse door slammed shut on its own, cutting me off from the night. The slam shook the walls and rattled the glass in their frames. I stumbled back, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst from my chest. The recorder slipped from my grip and clattered to the floor, its red light still flashing, still catching everything I didn't want to hear. The hallway was gone. Just the door, just the porch outside under the still Tennessee night. But I knew what I'd seen, and worse, I knew the voices weren't finished. The recorder hissed on the ground, then clicked, and a voice cut through the static. This one wasn't a child's. It was deep, gravelly, older than the others. The words were drawn out like a warning. "You don't leave." I froze, staring at the little machine like it had teeth. The farmhouse seemed to shrink around me, the walls closer, the air heavier, the dark corners filled with presence. My mind jumped to every case I'd studied, every piece of real ghost evidence I thought I understood. The Bell Witch whispers, the Queen Mary's footsteps, the children of Waverly Hills. But this was different. This was all of them bleeding into one another, like the house itself was a receiver tuned into every nightmare at once. I backed into the kitchen, gripping the counter to steady myself. My reflection in the window wavered, stretched. Behind it, just over my shoulder, a shadow leaned in. I spun. Nothing. The blinds swayed once, though the air was still. Then came the sound. Not from above, not from the hallway, but from inside the recorder. A layered chorus of voices. Men, women, children, all overlapping, all whispering words I couldn't separate. The pitch rose and fell like waves, filling the kitchen with a sickening hum. I clamped my hands over my ears, but it didn't matter. The voices weren't just in the air, they were in my head. I forced my eyes shut, praying it would stop, and for a heartbeat it did. When I opened the M again, the kitchen was gone. I stood in a corridor lined with steel bulkheads, the smell of salt and rust choking the air. The Queen Mary. The lights overhead swung as though the ship were still at sea, shadows stretching long across the deck. I could hear distant footsteps, a door slamming, water rushing somewhere too close. And then a hand, cold, damp, human, brushed across mine. I yanked back, and the corridor dissolved into the rotting white walls of Waverly Hills. A wheelchair squealed from the darkness, rolling on its own across the broken tiles. The sound of children's laughter echoed from one end, blending with coughs, sobs, whispers of, "Help me." I staggered backward, slamming into a wooden beam, and the walls shifted again. This time, I was back in Adams, standing in the old Bell farmhouse kitchen, but not as it looked now. The wallpaper peeled in long curls, the ceiling sagged, and something invisible paced the room with deliberate, heavy steps. A woman's voice rang out clear, louder than it had ever been. "Still here!" The worlds weren't separate anymore. They were stacked, bleeding into one another like layers of a nightmare I couldn't wake from. The recorder screamed with static, then clicked, and in a chorus that felt ancient, mocking, and endless, the voices all spoke at once. "You wanted proof." The light overhead shattered, plunging everything into black. And in that darkness, just before the recorder died, I heard a sound that froze me where I stood. My own voice whispering from the static, calling someone else's name. Someone who wasn't there yet. Someone who would come after me.